The taxi pulled away just as Sophie Garrison realized her purse was still sitting on the back seat, disappearing into the November night with her keys, her phone, and her wallet inside. She stood on the sidewalk in front of her apartment building at midnight, watching the taillights fade into nothing, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. The black cocktail dress she wore offered zero protection against the cold, and her heels were already making her feet ache. The charity gala had run late, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed, but now she was locked out with no way to call anyone. Sophie pressed the buzzer for the super's apartment, holding it down for a solid 10 seconds. Nothing. She tried again, then again, her fingers starting to go numb. The building's front door remained firmly locked, mocking her through the glass. "Come on, Mr. Henderson," she muttered, pressing the buzzer once more. "He's not going to answer." Sophie spun around to find a man standing a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his leather jacket. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked slightly windswept. Even in the dim streetlight, she could see he had sharp features and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Excuse me," she said, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Henderson, the super." "He's not going to answer." The man stepped closer, and Sophie instinctively took a step back. He seemed to notice, stopping where he was. "I'm not trying to scare you. I live in the building, 4th floor, Vincent Jameson." "How do you know he won't answer?" "Because it's midnight on a Friday, and Henderson has a standing poker game that runs until 3 in the morning. He turns off his buzzer so tenants won't bother him." Vincent pulled out his keys and moved toward the door. "You're locked out." Sophie nodded, feeling ridiculous in her evening gown while this stranger in jeans and a jacket looked completely at ease. "I left my purse in a taxi. Everything was in it." Vincent unlocked the door and held it open. "Come inside at least. It's freezing out here." She hesitated, but the cold was becoming unbearable. Sophie followed him into the lobby, immediately grateful for the warmth. The building was old but well-maintained, with Art Deco details that had drawn her to rent here 6 months ago. "Which floor?" Vincent asked. "7th. "But I can't get into my apartment without my keys." "Right." He ran a hand through his hair, thinking. "Henderson should be back around 3. That's at least 3 hours from now." Sophie felt her shoulders sag. 3 hours in the hallway. She could already imagine trying to sleep on the floor, her dress ruined, probably catching pneumonia in the process. "Look, I know this is going to sound weird, but you could wait in my apartment," Vincent said. "I have coffee, a couch, and I promise I'm not a serial killer." That's exactly what a serial killer would say. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair point. But you're going to freeze in the hallway, and I'm offering a warm place to wait. Your call." Sophie studied him. He had an honest face if such a thing existed. And more importantly, she was exhausted and cold, and the thought of sitting in a hallway for 3 hours made her want to cry. "Coffee would be amazing," she admitted. They took the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. Sophie caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked like she was coming home from a ball, while he looked like he had been out for a casual drink. The contrast was almost comical. Vincent's apartment was a corner unit, larger than she expected. The space was masculine but not messy, with leather furniture, dark wood accents, and floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city lights. Books lined one wall, and she noticed several guitars on stands near the windows. "Make yourself comfortable," he said, heading toward the kitchen. "How do you take your coffee?" "Black is fine." Sophie perched on the edge of the couch, still not entirely sure this was a good idea, but the apartment felt safe, lived in. There were photos on the shelves, plants on the windowsill, the kind of details that suggested a real person with a real life. Vincent returned with 2 mugs and handed her one before settling into the armchair across from her. So fancy party, charity gala, for pediatric cancer research. Sophie took a sip of coffee and nearly moaned. It was perfect, exactly what she needed. I'm on the board. Well, I was on the board. I just resigned tonight, actually. Why? She had not planned to tell a complete stranger about her life decisions, but something about the late hour and the strange circumstance made her honest. Because I've been living according to what everyone else thinks I should do instead of what I actually want. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his eyes interested. What do you actually want? To open a bookstore. The words came out before she could stop them. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. My family thinks I'm throwing away my business degree and my connections. But I love books. I love the idea of creating a space where people can discover stories that change their lives. That doesn't sound crazy at all. Sophie looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You don't think it's impractical, that I should stick with something more stable? I think life's too short to do things that don't make you happy. He took a drink of his coffee. For what it's worth, I'd visit your bookstore. You like to read. Love it. Always have. Vincent gestured to the wall of books. My apartment is slowly being overtaken, but I can't stop buying them. Sophie stood up and walked over to examine his collection, forgetting her earlier wariness. The shelves were organized but full, with everything from classic literature to modern thrillers to books on music theory. You play? She asked, nodding toward the guitars. Used to be my job. I toured with a band for about 8 years. Really? What band? The Violet Hour. We were moderately successful in the indie rock scene. Nothing huge, but we had our moments. He joined her by the shelves, pulling out a vinyl record. The cover showed 4 young men on a dark stage, instruments in hand. Vincent was recognizable, younger and leaner, his hair longer. I've heard of you, Sophie said, studying the album. My college roommate was obsessed with your music. What happened? We broke up 3 years ago. Creative differences, exhaustion, the usual story. I was tired of living on the road, wanted to actually have a home. Vincent put the record back. Now I write music for other people. Film scores, mostly, some commercial work. It pays better and I get to sleep in my own bed. Do you miss it, performing? Sometimes. But I don't miss the rest of it. The pressure, the ego battles, never knowing where you would be next week. He looked out the windows at the city. This is better. Quieter. Sophie found herself relaxing, drawn into the easy conversation. Vincent had a way of listening that made her feel heard, like her words actually mattered. They talked about music and books, about the city and the strange paths life took. She learned he was 32, had grown up in Boston, and made a pretty decent living from his composing work. He learned she was 28, had moved to the city for college and never left, and was terrified of disappointing her parents with her bookstore dream. Why would they be disappointed? Vincent asked, refilling their coffee mugs. It was past 1 in the morning now, and Sophie had kicked off her heels, curling her legs under her on the couch. Because they built their entire empire from nothing, and I'm their only child. They expect me to take over eventually. She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. My dad owns Garrison Real Estate. Maybe you have heard of it. Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly. The Garrison family. Yeah, I've heard of it. They own half the commercial properties in the city. Closer to a third, but yes. Sophie felt the familiar weight of expectation settle on her shoulders. My parents started with 1 rental property and built it into a multi-million-dollar company. And I appreciate everything they have done, everything they have given me. But I don't want to spend my life managing properties and chasing profits. I want to do something that feeds my soul. Have you told them that? They think it's a phase, that I'll get it out of my system and come back to the family business. She looked down at her coffee. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm being naive. Or maybe they're wrong and you know yourself better than they do. Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. You're allowed to want different things than your parents, Sophie. That doesn't make you ungrateful or naive. It makes you your own person. She met his eyes, feeling something shift in her chest. He barely knew her, but he understood in a way her family and friends did not seem to. Thank you for saying that. Just the truth. They fell into a comfortable silence, and Sophie found herself watching him. Vincent had strong hands, the kind that looked like they could build things or play intricate melodies. There was a scar on his left eyebrow, faint but visible. She wondered what the story was behind it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why are you being so nice to me?" "I'm a stranger who showed up in your building at midnight." Vincent considered the question, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, because you looked like you could use a friend, and because I know what it's like to feel stuck between what you want and what everyone expects from you." He paused. "Also, you have kind eyes. I figured you were worth taking a chance on." Sophie felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the coffee. "I'm glad you did." The conversation drifted to lighter topics. Vincent told her about the time his band's tour bus broke down in the middle of nowhere, Montana, and they ended up playing an impromptu concert in a truck-stop diner. Sophie told him about accidentally bidding on the wrong item at an auction and ending up with a life-size statue of a flamingo that still sat in her parents' garage. They laughed until her sides hurt, the kind of genuine laughter that felt like a release. Around 2 in the morning, Vincent's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned slightly. "Everything okay?" Sophie asked. "Just a work email. Client wants changes to a score I turned in yesterday." He put the phone down. "It can wait. You don't have to babysit me all night." "I can wait in the hallway if you need to work." "I'm not babysitting you. I'm enjoying your company." Vincent stood and stretched. "But I should probably make us some food. Have you eaten?" Sophie realized she was starving. The gala had featured tiny, pretentious appetizers that looked beautiful but left everyone hungry. "Not really." "Grilled cheese, okay. It's kind of my specialty." "Grilled cheese sounds perfect." She followed him into the kitchen, perching on a stool at the counter while he pulled out bread, butter, and several types of cheese. His movements were efficient, practiced. Sophie watched his hands as he worked, noticing the calluses on his fingertips from guitar strings. "So tell me about this bookstore," Vincent said as he heated the pan. "What's the vision?" Sophie felt herself light up. "I want it to feel like a living room. Comfortable chairs, good lighting, spaces where people can sit and read for hours. And I want to focus on curating interesting selections, not just bestsellers. Books that might get overlooked but deserve attention." "What kind of books?" "Everything. Literary fiction, mysteries, poetry, graphic novels, cookbooks. I want sections for kids and teens too. And maybe a small coffee bar, nothing fancy, just good coffee and pastries." She could see it all in her mind, had been dreaming about it for 2 years. "There's a space available in Brooklyn. 3,000 square feet, big windows, exposed brick. It's perfect." "Have you made an offer?" "Not yet. I'm trying to get my finances in order, figure out if I can actually make it work." She watched him flip the sandwiches, the cheese melting golden and perfect. "It's terrifying." "The best things usually are." Vincent plated the sandwiches and slid one across to her. "But for what it's worth, I think you should go for it. The city needs more independent bookstores, and it sounds like you have a real vision." They ate in comfortable silence, and Sophie could not remember the last time a simple grilled cheese had tasted so good. Everything about this night felt surreal. 6 hours ago, she had been at a stuffy gala, making small talk with people who bored her. Now she was sitting in a stranger's kitchen, eating grilled cheese at 2 in the morning, feeling more at ease than she had in months. "Can I hear something you've written?" she asked when they finished eating. "Your music." Vincent looked surprised. "Really, really? I'm curious." He led her back to the living room and picked up one of the acoustic guitars. "This is from a film score I did last year. Independent movie, small budget, but I liked the story. It was about a woman starting over after her life fell apart." He began to play, and Sophie felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The melody was haunting and beautiful, melancholic but with an underlying thread of hope. She could hear the story in it, the struggle and the resilience. Vincent played with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music, and she found herself studying his face. He had strong features, a jawline that could cut glass, but there was softness in his expression when he played. When the last note faded, Sophie realized she was holding her breath. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. "Really beautiful." Vincent opened his eyes and something passed between them, a moment of connection that felt significant. "Thank you. You write lyrics too?" "Sometimes. My bandmate usually handled most of the lyrics, but I've written a few over the years." He set the guitar down carefully. "Why? Just wondering. You seem like someone who would have a way with words." "I do better with melody than lyrics. Words can be tricky." He checked his phone. "It's 2:30. Henderson should be back in about 30 minutes. Sophie felt a strange disappointment. She was not ready for this night to end, which was ridiculous. She had just met Vincent a few hours ago. But there was something about him that made her want to keep talking, to learn everything about his life and his thoughts. "I should probably try to look presentable before I face the super," she said, smoothing down her dress. "I must look like a disaster. You look beautiful." The words were simple, matter-of-fact, but they made Sophie's heart skip. Vincent was not looking at her when he said it, already standing and collecting their coffee mugs, as if he had stated something obvious like the sky being blue. "Thank you for everything tonight," Sophie said. "The coffee, the food, the conversation, you really saved me." "It was my pleasure, honestly." He met her eyes then. "Best midnight I've had in a long time." They took the elevator up to the 7th floor together. The building was silent, everyone else asleep. Sophie felt hyper-aware of Vincent standing next to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and woodsy. Her apartment door looked exactly as she had left it, firmly locked. They settled on the floor outside it, backs against the wall. It should have been uncomfortable, but Sophie found she did not mind. Vincent had grabbed a blanket from his apartment and he draped it over her shoulders. "So what happens after you get your bookstore?" he asked. "What's the dream after that? Honestly, I haven't thought that far ahead. The bookstore feels like such a huge step that everything else seems blurry." She pulled the blanket tighter. "What about you? What's next for Vincent Jameson?" "I've been thinking about writing an album. Not for anyone else, just for me. No deadlines, no client notes, just music I want to make." "You should do it. Maybe. We'll see." He stretched his legs out in front of him. "I'm not good at doing things just for myself. Always feels selfish." "It's not selfish to create art. The world needs more beauty in it." Vincent turned to look at her, and Sophie felt the air shift between them. His eyes were very dark, almost black in the dim hallway light. She wondered what he was thinking, if he felt this pull too, this strange chemistry that had been building all night. "Sophie," he started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. "I'm glad I found you tonight. I'm glad you did too." The elevator dinged and they both jumped. The doors opened to reveal a short, stocky man in his 60s, wearing a Hawaiian shirt and carrying a tackle box that presumably held poker supplies. "Mr. Henderson," Sophie said, scrambling to her feet. Vincent stood smoothly beside her. The super looked between them with knowing eyes. "Locked out, Miss Garrison. I left my keys in a taxi." And Mr. Jameson here kept you company. How gentlemanly." Henderson pulled out his master key ring. "Let's get you inside." He unlocked the door, and Sophie felt a rush of relief followed immediately by reluctance. Her apartment meant this night was over. She would not have an excuse to keep talking to Vincent. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," she said. "No problem. Try to keep better track of your keys next time." He shuffled back toward the elevator, leaving them alone in the doorway. Sophie turned to Vincent, suddenly unsure what to say. "How did you thank someone for an entire night of unexpected companionship? For making you laugh and feel understood and less alone?" "I should let you get some sleep," Vincent said. "It's almost 3, right?" "Yes, sleep," she hesitated. "Vincent, I don't know how to thank you properly. You really went above and beyond tonight." "You don't need to thank me. I enjoyed every minute of it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Could I get your number? I mean, assuming you get your phone back. Once you do, I'd like to take you to dinner, if you want." Sophie felt her face break into a smile. "I'd really like that." They exchanged numbers, Vincent typing hers carefully into his phone. When he was done, he looked at her again with that intense gaze that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "Good night, Sophie." "Good night, Vincent." He walked back toward the elevator, and Sophie watched until the doors closed behind him. Then she went into her apartment and leaned against the door, her heart racing. The next morning, Sophie woke late with sun streaming through her windows. For a moment, she wondered if the entire night had been a dream. But her cocktail dress was draped over a chair, and her feet still ached from the heels, and when she checked her laptop, there was an email from the taxi company saying they had found her purse. She retrieved it that afternoon, everything intact. Her phone had died, but once she charged it, she saw a text waiting from an unknown number. "Hope you got your purse back. Still interested in that dinner. This is Vincent, by the way, from last night, the guy with the guitars." Sophie found herself grinning like an idiot as she typed back. "Purse retrieved, everything accounted for, and yes, definitely interested in dinner." "When?" His response came quickly. "Tonight. I know a place that serves the best Italian food in the city. Small, quiet, no pretension." "Perfect." "What time?" 7. "I'll pick you up." Sophie agreed and spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of nervous excitement. She tried on 6 different outfits before settling on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes. She told herself it was just dinner, just getting to know someone better, but her racing heart suggested otherwise. Vincent arrived exactly at 7, wearing dark pants and a gray button-down that made him look simultaneously casual and devastating. He held a single sunflower, which he handed to her with a slightly sheepish expression. "I know roses are traditional, but I saw this and thought of you," he said. "Bright and unexpected." Sophie felt something warm bloom in her chest. "It's perfect." The restaurant was tucked away on a quiet street in the West Village, exactly as Vincent had described. Small, intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles on every table. The owner greeted Vincent by name and showed them to a corner booth. "You come here often?" Sophie asked, sliding into the booth. "It's my favorite spot in the city. Family owned, been here for 40 years. Everything on the menu is incredible." They ordered wine and pasta, and the conversation picked up right where it had left off the night before. Sophie told him about her awkward call to the taxi company, trying to describe her purse, while the dispatcher grew increasingly impatient. Vincent told her about his morning spent arguing with a director who wanted more dramatic drums in a scene that called for subtle piano. "How do you deal with that?" Sophie asked. "People not understanding your artistic vision. You pick your battles. Some things are worth fighting for, some aren't. And sometimes clients actually have good ideas, even if they express them badly." He twirled pasta on his fork. The trick is figuring out what they are really asking for underneath the terrible description. That sounds exhausting. It can be, but I like the puzzle of it, taking someone's vague idea and turning it into something concrete and beautiful. He paused. Kind of like what you want to do with the bookstore, actually. Taking your vision and making it real. They talked about her plans, and Vincent asked intelligent questions that showed he was really listening. What demographic was she targeting? How would she compete with online retailers? What would make her store special? Sophie found herself articulating ideas she had only half formed, the conversation sharpening her vision. "You should definitely do this," Vincent said over dessert. "I can hear the passion in your voice. That's not something you should ignore." "My parents are going to lose their minds, probably, but they'll get over it once they see how happy you are." He reached across the table and took her hand, the gesture feeling completely natural. "Life's too short to live for other people's expectations, Sophie. Trust me on that." She looked down at their joined hands, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. The touch sent shivers up her arm. When had she last felt like this? Had she ever felt like this? "Why did you really invite me to dinner?" she asked quietly. Vincent met her eyes. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you all day. Because last night felt like something significant and I wanted to see if I was imagining it." "Were you imagining it?" "No." His voice was certain. "Definitely not." Sophie felt her breath catch. They were moving fast, ridiculously fast. But it felt right in a way she could not explain. Like recognizing something she had been searching for without knowing it. They left the restaurant and walked through the city, no particular destination in mind. Vincent kept her hand in his, and Sophie felt anchored by the contact. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. He told her about the pressure of touring, the exhaustion of performing the same songs night after night while pretending each show was fresh. She told him about growing up with wealth, but feeling like she could never quite measure up to her parents' success. "You think they're actually disappointed in you?" Vincent asked as they walked through Washington Square Park. "Or do you think they're just scared?" Sophie had never considered that angle. Scared of what? Of you failing? Of you getting hurt? Of you making choices they can't control? He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Parents often mask fear as disappointment. It's easier than admitting they're terrified for their kid." "That's very insightful." "I had a good therapist when the band broke up." Vincent smiled. "She taught me a lot about understanding other people's reactions." "You went to therapy?" "For 2 years. Best decision I ever made." "Helped me figure out who I was outside of the band, outside of everyone's expectations." He started walking again, pulling her gently along. "You might consider it too. Not that there's anything wrong with you, but it helps to have someone objective to talk things through with." Sophie felt something shift in her perception of him. A successful musician who went to therapy and recommended it without shame. A man who was thoughtful and self-aware and completely comfortable in his own skin. She was falling for him, fast and hard, and the realization should have scared her but somehow did not. They ended up back at their building around 11. In the lobby they stood close together, neither wanting to say goodnight. "I had a really great time," Sophie said. "Me too." Vincent brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Can I see you again? Soon? How about tomorrow?" he laughed. "Eager." "Very. Tomorrow it is." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Sophie did not want to. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle and perfect, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie felt dizzy. "Good night, Sophie," Vincent whispered against her forehead. "Good night." She watched him walk to the elevator. And when he turned back to look at her one last time before the doors closed, the expression on his face made her heart soar. The next few weeks passed in a blur of dates and conversations and stolen moments. Vincent took her to hidden gems throughout the city, places only locals knew about. A tiny jazz club in Brooklyn where they sat so close their shoulders touched, listening to a blind saxophonist play until 2 in the morning. A used bookstore in Queens where Sophie spent 3 hours browsing while Vincent patiently carried her growing stack of purchases. A rooftop garden in Manhattan where they watched the sunset and talked about their childhoods. Sophie learned that Vincent was fundamentally kind, the sort of person who noticed when people needed help and offered it without being asked. She watched him give his coat to a homeless woman on a freezing night, chat with the elderly doorman who everyone else ignored, and spend 20 minutes helping a lost tourist find their hotel. He learned that Sophie was braver than she gave herself credit for, passionate about justice and fairness, and had a wicked sense of humor that came out once she was comfortable. He loved making her laugh, loved the way her whole face transformed when she was truly happy. They spent hours in Vincent's apartment, him playing guitar while she read on the couch, comfortable in each other's presence. She started keeping a toothbrush in his bathroom, and he kept her favorite tea in his kitchen. It was domestic and sweet and felt like something much more significant than dating. One evening, about a month after they met, Sophie was curled up on Vincent's couch reading when he sat down beside her, looking nervous. "I need to tell you something," he said. Sophie's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The complication, the problem, the reason this was too good to be true. "Okay," she said carefully, setting down her book. "I haven't been completely honest with you about something." Vincent ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had learned meant he was anxious. "The music thing, my composing work, it's been more successful than I let on." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm not just making a decent living. I'm making a very good living. The film scores, the commercial work, it pays extremely well. And I had some smart people managing my money from the band days." He met her eyes. "I'm a millionaire, Sophie, several times over, actually." She stared at him, processing. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're Garrison Real Estate's heir, and I did not want you to think I was interested in you because of your family's money. And honestly, because it is nice to be with someone who likes me for me, not for my bank account." He looked genuinely worried. "Are you angry?" Sophie considered. "No, I mean I'm surprised, but I understand why you did not mention it. Money complicates things." "It does, but I wanted you to know I do not want there to be secrets between us." Vincent took her hand. "You're too important to me." "How important?" "Very. Possibly the most important person in my life, important." He pulled her closer. "I'm falling in love with you, Sophie. Actually, I think I'm already there. I just needed you to know the full picture before I said it." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind. "I'm falling in love with you too. Have been for weeks." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Sophie felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Later that night, lying in Vincent's bed with his arm around her and her head on his chest, Sophie told him about the bookstore space in Brooklyn. "I've been afraid to make an offer," she admitted. "But I think I'm ready. I want to do this." "Then do it. I believe in you." Vincent pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And if you need any help, I'm here. Advice, connections, whatever you need. I want to do it on my own, prove to myself I can. Then you will. But the offer stands." Sophie scheduled a viewing of the Brooklyn space for the following week. Vincent offered to come for moral support, but she declined, needing to face this on her own. The space was everything she remembered: high ceilings, beautiful light, enough room for her vision to come to life. She made an offer that afternoon. The waiting was agonizing. Sophie threw herself into business plans and financial projections, reaching out to her banker about small business loans. She told her parents about her plans over dinner at their estate in Connecticut, and it went exactly as expected. A bookstore. Her father, Richard Garrison, looked at her like she had announced plans to join the circus. "Sophie, be serious." "I am serious, Dad. This is what I want to do." Her mother, Catherine, set down her wine glass with the careful precision that meant she was upset. "We've given you every advantage, the best education, connections throughout the city, and you want to throw it away to sell books." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing my own path. You're making a mistake." Richard's voice was firm, the tone that probably intimidated his business rivals. Sophie refused to be intimidated. "The real estate market is booming. You could be running the company in 10 years. But I don't want to run the company. I never have." The dinner ended tense and unresolved. Sophie drove back to the city feeling shaken but determined. She went straight to Vincent's apartment and he held her while she cried out her frustration. "They'll come around," he said softly. "Give them time." "What if they don't? Then you do it anyway. You're not a child anymore, Sophie. You get to make your own choices." The bookstore offer was accepted 3 days later. Sophie signed the lease with shaking hands, still not quite believing she was doing this. Vincent took her out to celebrate, and they toasted with champagne at the same Italian restaurant where they had their first date. "To new beginnings," Vincent said, raising his glass. "To taking chances," Sophie added. "To us." They clinked glasses, and Sophie felt a rush of happiness so intense it almost hurt. Everything was falling into place. The next few months were chaos. Sophie divided her time between planning the bookstore and being with Vincent. She hired a contractor, chose paint colors, and spent weekends scouring estate sales for furniture. Vincent helped when she let him, mostly by keeping her fed and sane when the stress threatened to overwhelm her. He was working on his personal album, and sometimes Sophie would arrive at his apartment to find him hunched over his guitar, completely absorbed. She would curl up with a book and listen to him work, feeling privileged to witness his creative process. One evening, Vincent played her a new song he had been working on. It was different from his usual style, more personal and raw. The lyrics were about second chances and unexpected meetings and finding home in another person. "It's about you," he said when he finished. "About that night I found you locked out, about how my whole life changed in one random moment." Sophie felt tears on her cheeks. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever done for me. You inspire me." Vincent set down his guitar and pulled her into his lap. "I've written more music in the past few months than I have in years. You make me want to create. You make me braver. Before I met you, I was stuck, too scared to go after what I wanted. But you believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." They made love that night with a tenderness that felt like reverence, and afterward, Sophie lay awake watching Vincent sleep, feeling overwhelmed by how much she loved him. The bookstore opened on a crisp Saturday in April, 6 months after Sophie had signed the lease. She had agonized over the name for weeks before settling on chapter and verse, simple and classic. The space looked exactly how she had imagined it. Warm and inviting, with comfortable reading nooks, carefully curated shelves, and a small coffee bar that served pastries from a local bakery. Vincent was there early, helping with last-minute details. He had installed a small sound system and created a playlist of instrumental music that would play softly in the background. Sophie's few friends showed up, along with some neighbors who had watched the transformation with interest. Her parents did not come. Sophie tried not to let it hurt, but Vincent saw the disappointment in her eyes. "They'll come around," he said quietly, squeezing her hand. "This is just the beginning. The first day exceeded her modest expectations. People browsed, bought books, lingered in the reading nooks. Several customers asked if she did author events, and Sophie felt excitement bloom at the possibilities. By closing time, she was exhausted but exhilarated. "You did it," Vincent said, helping her clean up. "You actually did it. I can't believe it's real." "Believe it. You built this, Sophie. You should be incredibly proud." They went back to his apartment and celebrated properly, with wine and takeout and hours of talking about the day. Sophie felt like she was floating, high on success and love, and the sheer joy of having made something real from a dream. The bookstore grew steadily over the next few months. Sophie developed a loyal customer base, started hosting author readings and book clubs, and built relationships with local schools. The work was hard, the hours long, but she loved every minute of it. Vincent's album was released to critical acclaim. It was different from his film score work, more vulnerable and personal. Several tracks got significant radio play, and suddenly he was being interviewed and featured in music magazines. Sophie was incredibly proud, even as she worried about what success might mean for their relationship. "I'm not going back on tour," Vincent assured her when she voiced her concerns. "That part of my life is over. I'll do some promotional appearances, but that's it. You're my home now, Sophie. I'm not going anywhere." One evening in late summer, Sophie was locking up the bookstore when her mother appeared at the door. Catherine Garrison looked older than Sophie remembered, more tired. "Mom," Sophie unlocked the door, surprised. "What are you doing here? I wanted to see it. Your store." Catherine stepped inside, looking around with careful eyes. She examined the shelves, the reading nooks, the small coffee bar. Sophie waited, heart pounding, unsure what to expect. "It's lovely," Catherine finally said. "Truly lovely. You've created something special here." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. I owe you an apology. Your father and we've been thinking about our own disappointment instead of your happiness." Catherine sat down in one of the reading chairs and Sophie joined her. "We built the business for you to give you security and opportunity, but we forgot to ask what you actually wanted. I appreciate everything you and Dad have done. I really do. I know. And we appreciate that you're kind enough to say so, even though we've been terrible about this." Catherine looked at her daughter, really looked at her. "You seem happy. Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happy. The store is everything I dreamed it would be. And this man you're seeing, Vincent, your father had him investigated." Sophie felt a flash of anger. "You had him investigated," we were concerned, but the report came back glowing. "Successful composer, no criminal record, well respected in his field. And wealthy in his own right, which means he's not after your trust fund." Catherine smiled slightly. "Your father was disappointed about that last part. He was hoping to find a gold digger he could hate." Despite everything, Sophie laughed. "Vincent is amazing, Mom. I love him. I'd like to meet him, properly I mean, not through a background check." Sophie arranged dinner for the following week at a neutral restaurant. She was nervous about Vincent meeting her parents officially, but he was calm, confident in a way that steadied her. Richard and Catherine Garrison were punctual, arriving exactly on time. Sophie watched her father size up Vincent with the assessing gaze he usually reserved for business deals. Vincent met his eyes steadily, shaking his hand with a firm grip. The dinner started stiffly, with polite small talk about the weather and the restaurant's menu. But gradually, the conversation loosened. Vincent talked about his music career with humility and humor, making Catherine laugh with a story about a disastrous performance in Seattle. Richard asked intelligent questions about the music industry, and Vincent answered thoughtfully. Then Richard turned to Sophie's bookstore. "How's business?" "Good. Better than projected, actually. I'm breaking even, which is rare for a first-year business." Sophie felt Vincent's hand find hers under the table, offering support. "That's impressive." Richard sounded like he meant it. "What's your 5-year plan?" Sophie laid out her vision: expanding the author events, building partnerships with schools, possibly opening a second location eventually. She had not realized how much she had been thinking about the future until she articulated it. Her father listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. "You've thought this through," he said when she finished. "I underestimated you. That was foolish of me." "I learned from the best," Sophie said. "You and Mom taught me about business, about building something from nothing. I just applied those lessons to something I'm passionate about." Catherine reached across the table and took Sophie's free hand. "We're proud of you. I should have said that months ago, but I'm saying it now. We're proud of what you've accomplished." Sophie felt tears threaten again. "Thank you. That means everything to me." The dinner ended warmly, with promises to do it again soon. In the taxi back to Vincent's apartment, Sophie leaned against him, feeling like a weight had lifted. "They liked you," she said. "Your dad's intimidating. He liked you. I could tell. He only asks about 5-year plans when he's impressed." Vincent kissed the top of her head. "I'm glad. I want your family to approve. They're important to you, which makes them important to me." Back at the apartment, they stood at the windows looking out at the city lights. Sophie thought about the night they met, how she had been locked out and frustrated, and Vincent had appeared like some sort of guardian angel. Everything good in her life had stemmed from that random moment. "I love you," she said, turning to face him. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." Vincent cupped her face in his hands. "I love you too. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." He kissed her slowly, deeply, and Sophie felt herself melt into him. They made their way to the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions, coming together with the desperate tenderness of two people who had found something rare and precious. Later, in the quiet darkness, Vincent propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "Move in with me." Sophie's heart skipped. "What? Move in with me? Your lease is up next month anyway, and you practically live here already. Make it official. Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He traced patterns on her shoulder. "I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want to build a life with you, Sophie." She kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "Yes, absolutely yes." Sophie moved into Vincent's apartment a month later. It was surprisingly easy. Her things blending with his like they had always belonged there. They established routines. Morning coffee together before Sophie headed to the bookstore, Vincent working on music while she handled paperwork in the evenings. Lazy Sunday mornings spent in bed reading and talking. They traveled when they could, taking long weekends to explore new cities. Vincent showed Sophie his favorite spots from his touring days, and she introduced him to bookstores in every city they visited. They talked about everything, never running out of things to say, constantly learning new facets of each other. A year after they met, on a cold November night, Vincent suggested a walk. Sophie bundled up in her coat and scarf, and they headed out into the city. She did not realize where they were going until they turned onto their street. "You're taking me to our building?" she asked, confused. "To where we met." Vincent stopped in front of the entrance, the same spot where Sophie had stood locked out all those months ago. "I wanted to ask you something here, where it all started." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket, and Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. "Sophie Garrison, you changed my life the night I found you standing here. You made me believe in timing and fate and the possibility that one random moment can redirect your entire future." He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire ring surrounded by small diamonds. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, supporting your dreams and building new dreams together. Will you marry me?" Sophie was crying, nodding before she could find her voice. "Yes. Yes, of course yes." Vincent stood and slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her while people walking past stopped to applaud. Sophie laughed through her tears, feeling like her heart might burst from happiness. They called their families that night. Catherine cried happy tears and immediately started talking about wedding plans. Richard told Vincent he was getting the better end of the deal, but there was affection in his voice. Vincent's parents, who Sophie had met several times and adored, were thrilled. The wedding planning was surprisingly painless. Sophie and Vincent both wanted something intimate and meaningful rather than a huge spectacle. They settled on a small ceremony in a historic library in Manhattan, with just close family and friends. The irony of getting married in a library was not lost on Sophie, and it felt perfectly appropriate. The bookstore continued to thrive. Sophie hired part-time help so she could have more flexibility, and she started working with local schools to develop reading programs. Vincent's music career evolved in new directions, with opportunities to compose for prestigious projects. But he was careful to maintain balance, to never let work overtake life. They got married on a perfect Saturday in May, almost exactly 2 years after Sophie had opened the bookstore. She wore a simple ivory dress, and Vincent wore a dark suit that made him look devastating. The ceremony was short and personal, with vows they had written themselves. "You taught me that the best things in life are worth taking risks for," Sophie said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You made me brave. I promise to support your dreams the way you've supported mine, to laugh with you through the easy times and hold your hand through the hard ones. I promise to love you completely, honestly, forever." Vincent's voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "You walked into my life when I least expected it, and everything changed. You're my best friend, my inspiration, my home. I promise to protect your dreams, to make you laugh, to stand beside you through whatever life brings. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I live." When they kissed as husband and wife, their friends and family cheered. Sophie felt complete in a way she had never experienced before, like all the scattered pieces of her life had finally aligned. The reception was held at her rooftop garden, the same one where Vincent had taken her on one of their early dates. They danced under string lights while Vincent's former bandmates played acoustic versions of love songs. Sophie's parents looked genuinely happy, laughing and talking with Vincent's family. Everything felt right. Late in the evening, Sophie and Vincent snuck away from the party to a quiet corner of the roof. The city spread out below them, glittering and alive. "Happy?" Vincent asked, pulling her close. "Impossibly happy." Sophie leaned into him. "Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me, for taking a chance on a stranger who promised he wasn't a serial killer." She laughed, remembering that first conversation in the lobby. "Best decision I ever made." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city that had brought them together. Sophie thought about how her life could have gone differently. If she had not lost her purse, if the taxi driver had noticed sooner, if Vincent had come home 5 minutes later. But he had been there exactly when she needed him, and everything that followed had felt like destiny. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked softly. "About timing. About how many tiny decisions had to align perfectly for us to meet. It's kind of miraculous." "We're kind of miraculous." He kissed her temple. "Ready to go back to the party in a minute. I just want to stay here with you for a bit longer." So they did, holding each other while the party continued without them. Two people who had found something extraordinary in an ordinary midnight emergency. They honeymooned in Scotland, spending 2 weeks exploring castles and highlands and tiny bookshops in villages with names Sophie could barely pronounce. Vincent brought his guitar and played for her in their hotel rooms, writing songs inspired by the landscape and their adventures. Sophie felt more relaxed than she had in years, completely present in each moment. When they returned, life settled into a wonderful rhythm. Sophie's bookstore celebrated its 2nd anniversary, and she finally opened that second location she had dreamed about, this time in Queens. Vincent's album went platinum, and he was commissioned to score a major film for a legendary director. But success never pulled them apart. They made their relationship the priority, protecting their time together fiercely. A year and a half into their marriage, Sophie realized her period was late. She took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of the bookstore, her hands shaking as she watched the positive result appear. She stared at it for a long moment, overwhelmed by joy and terror in equal measure. She told Vincent that night over dinner. They were at home and she had cooked his favorite meal, trying to create the right atmosphere. But halfway through eating, she could not wait any longer. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. Vincent froze, fork halfway to his mouth. "You're pregnant? About 6 weeks, I think." "I took 3 tests to be sure." Sophie searched his face anxiously. "Is that okay? We haven't really talked about timing, and I know this might be sooner than we planned." He set down his fork carefully, then stood and pulled her out of her chair and into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you kidding? This is amazing. This is everything." Sophie felt relief flood through her. "You're happy?" "I'm thrilled, terrified but thrilled." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she repeated, and suddenly it felt real. The pregnancy was relatively easy. Sophie had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but Vincent was attentive and patient, bringing her crackers and ginger tea, rubbing her back when she felt awful. They told their families at 3 months, and both sets of parents were overjoyed. Catherine immediately started buying baby things, and Richard started talking about setting up trust funds. Sophie continued working at the bookstore, though she hired a manager to handle more of the day-to-day operations. Vincent cleared his schedule of major projects, wanting to be available for appointments and for Sophie. They painted the spare bedroom a soft yellow and filled it with furniture and books and stuffed animals. One evening, about 7 months into the pregnancy, they were lying in bed with Vincent's hand on Sophie's swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "I've been thinking about names," Sophie said. "What if it's a girl, Eleanor maybe, or Julia? Both beautiful. What about a boy?" "I was thinking about your grandfather's name. You said he was a big influence on you." Vincent looked touched. "Thomas. His name was Thomas. Thomas Jameson. I like that." The baby turned out to be a girl. Sophie went into labor on a snowy December evening, 2 weeks before her due date. Vincent timed contractions with the same focus he applied to music, keeping Sophie calm and supported through the long night. Eleanor Rose Jameson was born just after dawn, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with dark hair like her father and her mother's nose. Vincent cried when they placed her in his arms, overwhelmed by the tiny, perfect person they had created. Sophie watched her husband fall in love with their daughter, feeling her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Those first few months were exhausting and beautiful. They took turns with night feedings, both stumbling through the apartment like zombies. Vincent wrote lullabies and played them softly on his guitar while Sophie nursed. They marveled over every tiny milestone. The first smile, the first time Eleanor grabbed Vincent's finger, the way she would calm instantly when she heard his voice. Sophie's parents were devoted grandparents, visiting often and offering to babysit whenever needed. Vincent's parents moved closer to the city to be near their granddaughter. The bookstore continued to flourish under the manager's capable hands, and Vincent turned down several high-profile projects to be present for Alina's first year. On their third wedding anniversary, with Alina asleep in her crib, Sophie and Vincent had a rare, quiet evening alone. They sat on the couch with glasses of wine, exhausted but content. "Can you believe we almost didn't meet?" Sophie said, thinking back to that night 3 years ago. "If Henderson had answered his buzzer, if you had come home 5 minutes later, our entire lives would be different." "I don't think so," Vincent said thoughtfully. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Maybe not that night, but eventually. Some things are just meant to be." "You believe in fate. I believe in us." He kissed her softly. "I believe that you were worth waiting 32 years to find. And I believe that every day with you and Alina is a gift I don't take for granted." Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. She thought about the terrified woman she had been, locked out of her apartment at midnight, unsure of her future. She thought about the bookstore she almost had not opened, the risk she almost had not taken, the love she almost had not found. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." As the years passed, their life together deepened and grew richer. Sophie opened a third bookstore location and started a nonprofit to bring books to underserved schools. Vincent balanced composing with being present for his family, turning down projects that would take him away for too long. Alina grew into a bright, curious child who loved stories as much as her mother and music as much as her father. When Alina was 4, Sophie got pregnant again, this time with twin boys. Thomas and Henry Jameson arrived on a warm summer evening, completing their family in a way that felt ordained. The apartment that had once housed just Vincent became filled with the chaos and joy of 3 children, toys everywhere, music and laughter echoing off the walls. Sophie's parents fully embraced her choices, Richard even becoming an investor in her bookstore expansion. Catherine volunteered at the reading programs Sophie had established, finally understanding the impact her daughter was making. The relationships that had been strained healed completely, strengthened by mutual respect and love for Alina and the twins. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Sophie with a trip back to Scotland, just the two of them while the grandparents watched the kids. They revisited the places they had discovered on their honeymoon, older now and more tired, but still deeply in love. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked one evening as they walked through a small village. "Giving up the touring life, the spotlight?" "Not for a second." Vincent took her hand. "That was a different person's dream. This life, with you and our kids, this is my real dream. The one I didn't even know I wanted until I found you locked out of your apartment at midnight." Sophie laughed. "That night changed everything. That night gave me everything." They stood together on a stone bridge overlooking a river, watching the sun set over the Scottish Highlands. Sophie thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the choices and chances and moments of courage that had led to this perfect present. "What are you grateful for?" Vincent asked, a game they played sometimes with the kids. Us, the fact that you stayed with me until the super showed up." She turned to face him. "The fact that you saw something worth staying for." "I saw everything worth staying for," Vincent said, pulling her close. "I saw my future. I just did not know it yet." They kissed as the sun set behind them, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and built a life that exceeded both their dreams. And somewhere in New York City, in an apartment building lobby where their story had begun, life continued on. full of possibility and potential and the promise that sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. Years later, when Alina was old enough to understand, she would ask her parents to tell the story of how they met. Sophie and Vincent would take turns, laughing as they remembered the details, the fear and uncertainty that had led to everything good in their lives. "So Daddy saved you?" Alina would ask. "We saved each other," Sophie would say, meeting Vincent's eyes across the room, still feeling that spark, that connection that had ignited in a midnight moment years before. And Vincent would play the song he wrote about that night, the one he had never released, keeping it just for their family. The melody that captured the magic of chance and choice, of timing and trust, of two people finding each other exactly when they needed to. Their life was not perfect. They had arguments and hard days, challenges with the kids and pressures from work. But underneath it all was a foundation of love built in a single night and reinforced every day since. A love that started with Sophie locked out and Vincent willing to stay, and grew into something permanent and profound. On Sophie's 40th birthday, surrounded by family and friends in the flagship bookstore she had built from a dream, she looked around at the life she had created. The shelves full of stories, the people she loved, the man who had believed in her from the first night they met. Vincent caught her eye from across the room, where he was holding Henry while Thomas tugged on his pant leg, and smiled. That smile that still made her heart skip, even after all these years. She thought about the woman she had been at 28, scared to disappoint her parents, afraid to chase her dreams, stuck in a life that did not fit. That woman felt like a stranger now. Vincent had helped her become who she was always meant to be, brave, fulfilled, completely herself. Later that night, after the party ended and the kids were asleep and they were alone in their bedroom, Sophie told Vincent what she had been thinking. "Thank you for finding me," she said. "Thank you for letting me stay," he replied. And in that exchange was the whole story of their love. The finding and the staying, the courage and the choice, the midnight moment that changed everything. They fell asleep holding each other, grateful for every decision that had led them here, to this life, to each other, to home. The bookstore flourished for decades, becoming a neighborhood institution. Vincent's music was featured in award-winning films and became part of the cultural landscape. Their children grew into remarkable adults, carrying pieces of both parents in their passions and personalities. Alina became a music teacher. The twins both pursued careers that blended creativity and business, making their parents proud in different ways. Sophie and Vincent grew old together, their love maturing like fine wine, becoming richer and more complex with time. They never lost the ability to make each other laugh, to surprise each other, to find new depths in their connection. Every year on the anniversary of the night they met, they would stand outside their building's front door, remembering. Grateful for a locked door, a lost purse, a stranger who chose to stay. And when people asked them the secret to a lasting marriage, they would both say the same thing. Find someone who makes you better, who believes in your dreams, who will stand outside with you at midnight until help arrives. Find someone worth staying for and then choose to stay, over and over again every single day. Their love story was not fairy tale magic. It was something better. Real, earned, built moment by moment and choice by choice. It started with a crisis and a kind stranger, but it endured through intention and commitment and the daily decision to love each other well. Sophie never regretted leaving her taxi purse in that taxi all those years ago. It was the best mistake she ever made, the accident that led to everything wonderful in her life. And Vincent never regretted staying with a locked-out stranger until 3 in the morning. It was the best decision he ever made, the moment when his real life began. Together, they proved that love stories can start in the most ordinary ways and become extraordinary through the simple act of showing up, staying present, and choosing each other every day. Their story was one of courage and kindness, of dreams pursued and promises kept, of a midnight meeting that became a lifetime of love. And it all began with Sophie locked out at midnight, and Vincent willing to stay until the super finally showed up. From that single night of patience and conversation and unexpected connection, a whole life bloomed. Marriage and children, dreams realized and challenges overcome, a partnership that sustained them both through everything life brought. It was proof that sometimes the universe conspires to bring the right people together at exactly the right time, and all you have to do is be brave enough to let it happen.